Awesome.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our May edition of AHSA Queensland. And got a few apologies. Bob Lewis in our prison's away, so I'm standing in for him tonight. And as you all know, given apologies. We have some visitors and some new members. Now, Peter Gartshaw, over there. The camera won't have you on. But remember, I've just given him his badge. And for those who didn't know, he's the owner of Spitfire MB154. Ian Fisher, you're here too, aren't you? You remember? I've just given you your badge. Thank you. And Bill Mellor here, another new member, and John Pike, new member joined us recently. And indeed tonight we've got another new member who's come and signed in, joined up in one go. Yeah, Tony Hammond, beg your pardon. Nice to meet you, nice to have you along. Thank you. Peter Dunn, we're doing our technical work, of course, as usual. And we've got a special person here on my left, Stephen Holden, who's going to be talking about being Chief Engineer of Stralis Aircraft. He'll be delivering a talk about Stralis Aircraft, Australia's opportunity for revitalising regional aviation. Look forward to having that in a few minutes. Bit of news stuff. News came out this morning that the annual Pacific Air Show at Gold Coast has been cancelled this year because of the mass lack of being a beach. So much sand's been eroded, although they've been trying for the last month or so to try and build it back. They concluded they cannot get enough sand back there to have a decent beach, and it was announced today that this year's Pacific Air Show at Gold Coast has been cancelled. That's sad for all people. Apparently, early requests for seats have been double what it was last year, so it looked like it was going to be very, very good. I'm sure you're all enjoying our monthly magazine, Downwind, which is published by Jeff Nielsen in Townsville. Just remember, editors of magazines like that are always looking for extra copy about articles to go in it. So if you've got anything to contribute to it, please do. So far, he's done a very good job, and he's able to put up a great magazine every month. Just regarding future meetings, June 27th, Rick Davies will be talking very different days about Army Aviation, CAA, I presume it's the Civil Aviation Authority in the UK, then CASA and the RFDS. And for July, Garrett Russell and Barry Collins will be talking about World Glider Flight Training. Would glider flight training make you a better pilot? September, Gordon Clark going to talk about Australian PRU, I guess it's photographic reconnaissance. And on October, Ray Villeman, we're talking about CRM, Crew Resource Management. Now hand you over to Stephen to give his talk. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Warwick. Nice to be here and meet you all. And thanks, Peter, for the invitation to do this tonight. So I will maybe just introduce myself a little bit. So my background is I'm an aerospace engineer. I studied aerospace engineering at RMIT in Melbourne some 20-ish or so years ago. Since then, I've spent most of my career working for larger companies, starting in Melbourne with Northrop Grumman on the Joint Strike Fighter program, moving overseas to Germany for a few years working at Airbus. And then I spent about 10 years in the States working for United Technologies, it was at the time. It's now Collins. It was Goodrich before that. And then spent about half of that time on the other coast working for Gulfstream Aircraft. So during COVID, my interest in working for the bigger companies kind of dwindled a little bit, and I sort of moved out of those bigger companies into the smaller world of emerging aviation technology, and did some consulting for Lilium. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Lilium. They're one of these electric air taxi companies that unfortunately folded around Christmas time. But yeah, spent a little bit of time there. And once that finished, this opportunity with Stralis came up, and I've been there now for a bit over 2 years, working on this new technology here in Brisbane. So yeah, tonight there's quite a bit of stuff I want to cover. I know it's a historical society, so we have 2 aircraft of our own in the hangar. A little over a year ago, probably, we had some interest from a gentleman called Tony Harrington, who lives in Brisbane, quite a well-renowned journalist, I guess, and writes for Flight International and stuff like that. So he did a little bit of research for us on our 2 aircraft. So I'll share the history of our 2 Bonanzas a little bit, and also go through what our technology is and what we're trying to achieve here in Australia. So, all right. So let me start by asking, who's heard of Stralis? Has anyone come across us in Brisbane yet?
Only last week.
No? Okay, good. Fresh faces. This will be fun then. So at Stralis, like, we are trying to make aircraft fly off hydrogen gas, or hydrogen, effectively. So we have a roadmap. I'll go through some of that with you on how we plan to bring this into industry, and then what we're doing at the moment out at Brisbane Airport, developing the system before we go fly. So I spoke a little bit about my background. This is the team that we have at Stralis. Not everyone's up there, but most of us are. So the majority of the team there has quite a deep background in aerospace. So as I said, with my career, quite a few faces up there have had similar careers with the big incumbent aerospace companies. And also that's transition through the 2016 and on to the more evolving technology in aerospace. The 2 founders in the top left, Bob Kreiner, Stuart Johnson, they were 2 early members of the team at Magniex. Magniex, if you're not familiar with them, they were a Gold Coast-based startup, probably 10 years ago now-ish, that were developing an electric motor to be used in aviation applications. They since moved to the US, chasing bigger pots of money and investment and everything, but they're still around. But obviously not all the team wanted to move back to the US. So it was a challenge for those of us that have been overseas for quite some time to actually come back to Australia and find interesting work in Australia. So one of the goals of building Stralis for us is to actually bring that industry back to Australia. There's deep aviation roots in Australia through the Hawker de Havilland era, and it looked like we were bringing it back with the JSF work back in the early 2000s, but then everything kind of fell off a cliff again. So we're really trying to be part of what we can to encourage engineering and manufacture and aviation to return to Australia. Alongside the aviation experience we have, there's a couple other team members that are really kind of heavy hitters in their space. So we have quite, it is amazing power electronics engineer that works with us. And Andrew Dix down the bottom there he literally wrote the textbook on fuel cell technology. So I'll get into what fuel cells mean in our world as opposed to traditional aerospace shortly. But yeah, we've got for a small company, we've got quite a strong team working on it. So one of the big problems that we're trying to solve is this net zero transition by 2050. So the sustainability targets and everything set up by IATA and how we stop polluting and putting carbon into the atmosphere it is a challenge, and no one really has good solutions yet. So the 2 planes you see on the right there were flown, and I think are still flying with Magniex, the company I mentioned from the Gold Coast. A lot of the team had a big hand in developing these aircraft. But through that process, they realized, and a lot of us on different programs as well, realized a similar thing, that batteries just aren't there for aircraft yet. So electric aviation, it's great, but batteries aren't the solution there. They're too heavy. They're very expensive considering the low cycle life they've got on the batteries. They need to be replaced too often, and it's just cost prohibitive. And the turnaround time between flights is too long for the charging requirements. The other alternative that gets talked about a lot is the sustainable aviation fuels. Again, there's a lot of problems with that sustainable, or that SAF avenue, and that it's too expensive. Like it's a lot more expensive than current jet fuels. It's difficult to scale. Either the feedstocks aren't there, or the synthetic fuels are difficult to produce at scale. So the solution that we're proposing is hydrogen electric propulsion. So in its simplest version, you can see the design for what we're proposing in one of our bonanzas in the top there. But to break it down into its three simplest components, there's liquid hydrogen tanks that we're using the wingtips of the bonanza to carry. There's an electric motor up front which spins the propeller, and between the two sits a fuel cell. Now, the easiest way I can explain what a fuel cell is, for those that don't know, is think of it like a battery. It's not a battery, I want to be very clear, but it's similar to a battery in that there's a number of plates contained within the fuel cell that are separated by a number of membranes. Unlike a battery, the chemistry isn't included in there. So we feed the hydrogen and oxygen in through air and create that chemical reaction to produce electricity. So we're not storing the energy on the plane in the fuel cell, we're storing it in the hydrogen tanks and then using it to produce electricity. Now, the only byproducts of doing that, aside from the electricity, are heat and water vapor. So it's very clean, very simple technology if you don't look into the details too much. It's there's a lot of complications around actually implementing it, but the technology there is quite simple, and it's been around for a long time as well. Fuel cells aren't new by any stretch of the imagination, but there's new chemistries and new membranes that are being developed that lend itself more towards aviation. So I'll get into that now. So on the right-hand side of the screen there, you can see a couple different payload range comparisons. So the red line there is the typical fuel used for like bonanzas. Yeah, payload range chart. The red line is traditional fuels. The orange line, if we do the same calculations and try and figure out how far we can fly on batteries, obviously the payload range chart like envelope reduces dramatically. Like it's not a feasible aircraft at that point. Fuel cells, there's current fuel cell technology and a new technology that I'll explain in the next slide. The current hydrogen electric fuel cell technology is the lower blue line. So again, not particularly useful payload range envelope. But it has been done. There are a number of aircraft that have flown on that as demonstrators, and that is what we're currently developing on site to do those initial trial flights. Where the benefit's really going to come for us is the light green line. So the new chemistry, new membranes that are becoming available, let us run the fuel cells at a much higher temperature. So with that higher temperature, there's a number of benefits I'll get to shortly. This slide here just goes through a bit of the history of previous projects that have flown, or previous aircraft that have flown on hydrogen. So forgetting about the hundreds of Zeppelins and everything back in the World War I era, aircraft have been flying on liquid hydrogen in various capacities since the 50s. There were a couple programs in the 50s, there were a couple programs in the 80s, and then in the mid 2000s, there was renewed interest in hydrogen, and a number of companies or have flown demonstrators and are making the technology work. Most recently, I think Joby, so another eVTOL air taxi company out of California, did a 500-mile flight off liquid hydrogen on one of their demonstrator vehicles. So, yeah, this guy here, this crazy looking plane, but it seems to be working quite well for them. They're doing amazing things over there, and they've got an amazing budget to make it work. But I mean, it's an amazing result too, right? So a 500-mile flight on this new technology is really nothing to scoff at. So given the history, why is now any different to the past? And it never took off in the past. Well, as I said, the chemistries are changing. So the previous technology ran fuel cells at about 60 to 80 degrees Celsius. They're quite efficient. They run about 50% efficient. So for a Bonanza, when we're looking at like 250 kilowatts-ish for flight, we need to reject about 250 kilowatts of heat as well. So the size of the cooling system that's required to do that, when we only have a temperature delta of 20, 40 degrees Celsius, is prohibitive. And that's why the power density is so low. So it's around 0.4 kilowatts per kilogram. For a 250 kilogram engine, you can imagine how heavy that system is, largely because of the cooling requirements of that particular fuel cell technology. So the iron pair fuel cells that we are currently developing are able to run at a lot hotter temperatures. So they run up at about 180 to 200 degrees Celsius. So with that temperature, we have a lot more efficient cooling systems with the delta down to typical ambient temperatures. So reducing the cooling system reduces a lot of the weight, and we can get power densities up to around the 2.6 kilowatts per kilogram. So for a 250 kilowatt engine, that's around 100 kilogram engine, which is half the weight of the typical IO 540 that comes out of this aircraft. So that's obviously the benefit of this development in technology. So the way we try and explain that a little bit, again, is to liken it to batteries. So 20 years ago, lithium-ion batteries weren't too much of a thing. All the old NiCads and whatever they were great. They did their job. But as soon as lithium-ion batteries became available, things changed. We were able to power devices for longer and better, and just everything became electrified. So it's a similar thing, we think, in fuel cell technology. There's a lot more opportunities now. But running at temperature like that makes certain things more difficult as well. So there's a lot of componentry that works around these fuel cells. So we need turbo compressors, we need heat exchangers, we need all sorts of things to condition liquid hydrogen up to the temperature. So it sits at around negative 253 degrees, I want to say, in its liquid form. So we have to condition that up to about 180 degrees to put it into the fuel cell. So there's a lot of balance of plant that sits around this particular technology. So in a fuel cell, there's a bunch of what they call bipolar plates. And it's on each side of that plate, there's a membrane. So those membranes are called PEMs, proton exchange membranes. Oxygen goes one side and hydrogen goes the other side. And what happens is the electron gets stripped off the hydrogen molecule and travels around the circuit through the motor and everything, while the proton simply exchanges, like moves across the other side of the fuel cell There's a catalyst on those membranes that make it react with the oxygen in the air to strip that electron off, and then heat is created through the process, and the hydrogen proton reacts with oxygen in the air to create the water vapor. So it's all chemistry. We're not combusting anything. It's simply a reaction. If you know anything about electrolyzers and how they make hydrogen from water, it's the same thing. So you put two electrodes in water with electricity running through it, and one end will bubble with oxygen, and the other end will bubble with hydrogen. So it's the exact opposite process. Okay, so this is our high temperature PEM fuel cell system that we're currently developing. So we're developing in 120 kilowatt modules. Those modules can be added together to whatever size power plant really you want to. So for the Bonanza, we're planning on using 2 of them in that to get it flying. That'll get us to 240 kilowatts. For the Beach 1900, that'll be our first commercial product. We can put 8 of them in the system for around a megawatt class engine. So this is our roadmap at Stralis. So the system we're working on at the moment, as I said, 120 kilowatts. That will be the first product that first technology we're really trying to create into a product. So there's a number of aircraft that we might be able to put that in directly. There's a lot of people that are interested in getting their hands on that as soon as they can. But first up, we're going to fly our technology demonstrator, which is the A36. Once we're successful there and can show that we've done it and the technology is real and it works, we plan to retrofit a 1900 aircraft, and hopefully quite a few of them, to a number of customers that are lined up. A lot of them in Australia, but a lot of them around the world as well. But as you can probably imagine, with new technology, not all of it is suited to retrofit applications. So hydrogen storage is different to kerosene storage or avgas storage, and electric motors have challenges with them as well, especially when you're talking about constant speed propellers and all sorts of other things there. So to get an optimal aircraft, we need to design an optimal aircraft for it. So, and that's the SA1 at the bottom of the page there. So it's clean sheet aircraft, about 50 seats, and it will be our, I won't say end product, but our first main product we're aiming to achieve. The timelines there are kind of out in mid 2030s. Yep. So still propellers. There's some reasons for that. It's well, we'll talk about it a little bit more here, but it's propellers on small aircraft are more efficient. They aren't as fast, but there's reasons that makes a lot of sense as well that I'll talk about now. So for the SA1, we've got a comparison there on the left-hand side of screen, comparing it to a Dash 8 type aircraft. So again, there's the Jet A cost per seat, available seat kilometer versus range chart. So those that aren't familiar, cost per available seat kilometer is the metric airlines use to I don't know, talk about how efficient the aircraft is. So how much does it cost to fly a passenger per kilometer? And that's really the number they want to minimize to make themselves more profitable. So Jet A is there. Sustainable aviation fuel obviously is more expensive than standard Jet A. Batteries just really don't have any range available to them for this size aircraft. But the hydrogen electric technology does come out as quite a bit better than traditional fuels anyway. So comparing the technology or the cost per seat kilometer to a typical single aisle aircraft as well shows that that cost is lower for this 50 seat size aircraft than like 200 odd seats on a 737 or an A320, which is considered the peak of aircraft efficient efficiency in the industry. Now, what that means, if we were to go and replace all the 737s and A320s with this new technology, is that we would need 4 of these aircraft per 737 that exists. Now, that's a lot more aircraft, a lot more staff, a lot more movements and everything. But the opportunities that provides are that it makes more routes available, and smaller planes moving smaller numbers of people mean that like we don't have to rely on all the big hubs to fill planes up and just move people between Brisbane and Sydney or Melbourne and Adelaide, for example. So there is opportunity for airports like Archerfield to connect direct to, I don't know, say Newcastle or Moranbah or something like that with this technology, and not be prohibitive for operators to try and fill planes or anything. So more routes available, better regional access with more but smaller aircraft operating with lower costs and more efficiency. Okay, so talking about a bit more about Bonanzas then. So yeah, our tech demo or technology demonstrator is the Bonanza. We're planning on flying it firstly on the low temperature PEM fuel cells, just to get a plane in the air and bring CASA on the journey with us through the experimental certificate and everything, so they start understanding the technology. Once we've flown that, we'll put the high temperature PEM system in there and make it into more of a feasible product. So we plan to fly with 4 passengers, a range of 500 kilometers, and basically, yeah, it becomes a useful aircraft again at that point. So this is a short roadmap for where we are in the process at the moment. Currently, we are doing ground testing of the system. So we plan to do first flight either late this year or early next year. The next couple of months, we'll start integrating the system that we've been running on the ground into the airframe, and doing obviously more ground runs, taxi runs, and everything leading up to that. And then towards the middle of next year, towards the end of next year, that system, as I said, will transition to the high temperature fuel cells. So these are our 2 aircraft. Bonnie, short for Bonanza, and Clyde, which is inseparable from Bonnie. Bonnie, that's not the best photo of her, unfortunately. It's the one that we use in all our presentations, though, still. So she will fly again. She's currently being refurbished, and does look a lot better now. She's still got a ways to go, but she's looking a lot better on the outside anyway. And then Clyde is our ground test bed. So currently he doesn't have wings. He's been mounted on a cart to let us move it around. It's just easier to fit in a hangar, like squeeze him in a corner when he's not being used. And we've got better access inside the cabin as well when we're playing with all the electronics and different components that are in there. So a bit of the history we've managed to dig up about the 2 aircraft. So Bonnie is an A36, which was built in 1973, and then basically came straight out to Australia from there. It's had 3 different registrations, so PHI, ELH, and then is currently X2H. So bit of a timeline here. I know that's probably hard to read. I'll just go through it quickly. There's some interesting bits in there. So the first owner in Australia was Lukey Mufflers. So some of you might recognize the brand name from back in the day. But he was heavily involved in the motorsport world in Australia at the time. And for the next probably 10 years or so, the aircraft kind of bounced around the motorsport world, it seems. So Lukey Mufflers seems to have sold it on to Jack Brabham at some point. So Brabham Aviation had the plane for a little while before it was moved onto Bib Stilwell, I think. So anyone from Melbourne probably recognizes the name Bib Stilwell from all the Ford dealerships, I think it is, around around Melbourne. And then it moved out to Western Australia and did a bit of flying, regional flying out there before Jeff Hunt bought it and took it to Darwin with Air Frontier. So they operated it for a number of years, up till about 2017, when they retired the aircraft, until we bought it at the beginning of 2023. Speaking to Jeff, he had no shortage of stories about the aircraft and what it was used for and where it went and the kind of things that were put into it, including one story about a pony that was transferred from an island somewhere. So I don't...
Inside the aircraft.
I haven't seen photos of proof, but don't think I'd like to be in a Bonanza with a horse sitting in the back. Nevertheless, it apparently happened. So yeah, Bonnie today, as I said, we bought her at the beginning of 2023. We bought it alongside Clyde. So they were both ferried down on trailers from Darwin to our location at Brisbane Airport. Yeah, so Bonnie's sitting in the hangar at the moment. She looks a little bit better in that second photo there. So the paint's all been stripped back and everything there. Most of the paint is back on now, or will be shortly. And then yeah, by the end of the year she'll be a flying aircraft again and ready to go. Clyde, on the other hand, he's a straight 36 model. Again, free registrations, 2 before he came to us. When we found Clyde, he was up to his knees in a paddock somewhere at the back of Darwin somewhere. It was a bit of a mission to dig him out and get him apart and onto the trailer. So it doesn't look too bad in that photo there, but I think that was in 2008 already, and we pulled him out in 2023. So he had sunk considerably more than that picture would indicate. So again, a bit of a timeline on Clyde. So he has a little bit less of motorsport royalty in his background, but bounced around a lot of Australia, working for like regional operators, I guess. So a bit of time in Emerald and Rockhampton and Maryborough, and went down to Melbourne for a while. So one of the notable owners there was the mayor of Ararat in Victoria for a little while. He used to fly engineers, I think, all over different engineering projects around the state, or at least around his territory, and everything to inspect the various things that were going on. Here's a story there. A film production outfit called United American and Australian Films owned him for a little while as well. I don't know if anyone here is into horror movies. There's a famous Australian horror movie called Razorback, which is about a killer pig or something. I haven't seen it. The trailer looks hysterical though. So they were the film outfit that owned the plane at the time, and I don't know if the plane was involved in production of that movie at all. But again, in around the 2000 mark, the Hunts bought the aircraft and took it on a big journey up to Darwin. Operated out of there for quite a while. Some of the communities they operated it from, you can see down in the lower right here. And then in 2007, they decommissioned that particular aircraft. So Clyde is a little beyond repair. So we will put him back together and he'll be on wheels and be able to move him around, but he's become our engineering test bed. So we don't have to be as careful as we do with Bonnie, with where we cut holes and drill holes and break things and bend things and everything to get the system in and out for those initial like product revisions and engineering changes and everything. So trying to make him look the part still, but he's definitely not ever going to find his way back in the air, which is a little sad. So a couple pictures there. The picture in the middle of the screen, that is where our low temperature fuel cell system sits at the moment. So you can see a lot of components there. It's quite spread out because that allows us to get in there and change things and inspect things and have easy access to all the instrumentation and everything we've got on there for now. Once we move it to the aircraft, obviously that will be packaged down, and most of it will live in the engine bay. Some of it will live in the rear of the aircraft. Most of the cooling system will be sitting behind the pilot, and we'll have to duct air in and through the fuselage to get that initial aircraft flying. The high temperature system, like you saw that on the first page, everything will live in the engine bay, because we can reduce the size so significantly, other than the fuel itself, which will sit on the wingtips. The middle picture on the right-hand side there is at the end of the first round of testing we did back in November. So it was the first time we actually turned on hydrogen and spun the propeller from the hydrogen. So it was a bit of a mission just to get hydrogen at Brisbane Airport. That was about a year's worth of work just to be allowed to bring hydrogen on the site there and jump through all those hurdles. But very soon after we got that approval, everything else was kind of in place. We'd already tested the electric motor powered from the grid, and we're able to switch out the system for the fuel cell system pretty quickly after that. And since then, we've been implementing learnings from that initial testing. So we've had a couple test failures over the first half of this year. We had an engine malfunction, like the electric motor malfunction, back in January. That wasn't something we did to it. It was an issue with the motor itself. So that went back to the manufacturer, and they fixed that problem and changed some of their architecture there for us as well. And then we had a failure of one of the fuel cell stacks as well. So it highlighted to us that we weren't instrumenting certain things the way we should have been, and we've since implemented better controls, better information to the test team about what we're doing then. So we hopefully don't do that again, but it's part of the fun of development, right? So we don't like breaking stuff, but when you do break stuff, as long as you learn a lot from that process, then that's really what we're trying to achieve. So a little bit about the ground testing. So you can see the test layout there a bit better without the team standing in front of it. So on the left-hand side, that's currently the hydrogen supply for the fuel cells. That will shortly transfer onto the wingtips in gaseous form. So we're not going to start using liquid hydrogen on the aircraft until early mid next year. We can fly originally on gas. This here is the fuel cell system. So you saw the other picture of that. And this is the cooling system that we're using to cool that fuel cell system. So all that runs the electricity to the electric motor in the front of Clyde and spins the propeller. So at the moment, we're upgrading this, and we're starting to move as much of the system into Clyde as we can for the next round of testing. On the right-hand side up the top, you can see some of the test information that we get. So we don't operate the test from inside the aircraft yet, so that will come. But way off to the right-hand side of the screen, we've got our offices, and we control the whole system from our desks, basically in that test room. So a simple version of the control system can be seen up there. So things are a little bit color-coded. So the dark blue represents a bunch of the cooling system components. The red represents the hydrogen system. The green is a nitrogen system there. So to inert a lot of the hydrogen system when it's not being used, we fill the spaces with nitrogen, so it's not reactive, not a safety issue. And also we have a lot of pneumatic valves in there. So we're not, especially in this area here, it's a hazardous area. We're required to do that to get the approvals to bring it onto the airport. But it means we don't have electricity in that space. So we run pneumatic valves powered by the nitrogen that sits on the cart to do that. So, and then the light blue in the middle there is the air system. So We have compressors and intercoolers and stuff to feed the other side of the fuel cell with the oxygen required to complete the reaction. So first flight, again, you can see Bonnie down here, Clyde sitting to the left. We have submitted the application for experimental certificate earlier this year. So we've been talking to CASA now for about 2 years on what we intend to do, and they've been incredibly supportive of what we are trying to do. And then, yeah, just a picture of some of the engineering that's going on behind the scenes for some of the equipment that is coming on board shortly after the first flight. So that's an fairly old picture now of the liquid hydrogen system, but yeah, it's going to sit in wing pods that aren't too much bigger than the existing existing tip tanks that exist on Bonanzas. It will be liquid hydrogen, yeah. So the difference between gaseous and liquid is just the amount of energy per volume, really. So in liquid form, basically gives you range. Gaseous like starts getting a little bit scary when you're running tanks at 700 bar, and there's really not that much hydrogen even at those pressures to get any kind of meaningful range. So that's why we're looking at liquid. Okay, as you can imagine, there's a lot more involved in making this happen than just a bunch of crazy engineers sitting there trying to build a plane. So quite early on in the piece, we were talking to Brisbane Airport, we're co-located with Aviation Australia, a training facility out at Brisbane Airport, and Skytrans, so a North Queensland operator, were quite interested in what we were doing early on as well. So between that initial group of people, we decided like we'd set up this Hydrogen Flight Alliance. And I'm not sure if all the members are on there now, but that's the majority of them at least. So we have 3 different aircraft companies doing a similar thing. So there's AMSL out of Bankstown, and Hypersonics is doing a hypersonic aircraft missile type thing that's also based in Brisbane here. And then there's a number of airports that sit on this alliance. RFDS and Skytrans, 2 operators there. There's BOC and Fortescue, that's hydrogen suppliers, and a number of research and training facilities as well to start thinking about qualifications people are going to need to work on this new technology as it comes online. So yeah, whole ecosystem of things that are happening around what we're specifically trying to do to move the whole hydrogen infrastructure forward, figure out all the airport operations involved in everything aircraft related, like the refueling technology and all that. And then, yeah, as I said, the training and qualification piece behind it. So a bit about how we're paying for all this. So we have a little bit of pre-seed investment from a number of companies, mostly US based. Not all. There's some smaller investors from elsewhere. We've also won a number of government grants here in Australia and New Zealand that are helping fund various parts of what we're trying to do. So the biggest one is the EATP grant, so Emerging Aviation Technologies Program or something like that. Partnerships, there we go. That is a big driver for getting Bonnie back in the air, basically. The Industry Growth Program, that's helping a lot to get the actual fuel cell technology working. So here in Brisbane, we're doing all the work to get Bonnie back in the air. We have a partner in the US that we're working with that has decades worth of experience developing fuel cells. So they're leading the charge a little bit at the moment for that fuel cell technology until it's ready to bring out here, and we'll start doing some testing here in Australia and probably in New Zealand shortly as well of our own. But for now, a lot of that stuff's happening based out of the US. We also have some funding to develop the liquid hydrogen system in New Zealand. So there's a company over there called Fabrum that have deep expertise in cryogenics and have some pretty cool technology in the tanks as well that they've created. So yeah, earlier this year, we started getting quite a bit of interest in Bonanzas and people coming out of the woodworks with their Bonanzas saying, can we do the same thing with their aircraft? So we put out an EOI, or expression of interest, to see how many people would be interested in something like this. And there was a lot of interest from the US, a little bit of interest from Europe as well in doing something. So we've started talking to a few people. They fall into three main categories. People who just want it in there now and go fly and be part of the whole experimental movement. There's people that aren't quite sure, want to see what happens to other people first, and then they're pretty keen to get hold of it as quickly as they can afterwards. And then there's people that are just really interested in seeing it certified, and yeah, like either retrofitting their own aircraft or whatever that looks like off the back of that. So most of that has been through like Bonanza societies, Beechcraft societies and everything, but there are a number of other people who have reached out with different aircraft as well that want to convert all sorts of things. So it's been an interesting few months talking to all these people. So yeah, on that note, that's all I've got. Thanks for paying attention, and
I'm sure there'll be
with your
quite a few
questions.
questions.
Yep.
Those tanks on the wingtips of hydrogen,
Yep.
liquid hydrogen, is that going to be kept under great pressure as it tries to boil off, or what?
No, so liquid hydrogen, we can run that at very low pressures. So that'll be about 6 to 10 bar, probably in that range. So yeah, the thing is with that, we just have to keep it cold. Like, it's well-insulated tank. You can design the tank for different hold times. So basically, yeah, how well you insulate it is how long you can hold the hydrogen in there without having to vent off as it starts to heat up.
And
So,
to become gaseous hydrogen to burn, just evaporates off, I suppose, when pressure's down or temperature's right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you can add a small amount of energy to the tank to then encourage the boil off, and then you pull gas and start bring that up to temperature for the fuel cell operation.
So the hydrogen combines with oxygen, obviously.
Yep.
It's like a fire.
It's not
it gives off a lot of heat.
Yep.
And then that drives your electric motors. How do you convert from that heat?
No, so the heat isn't what creates the energy. So the electricity creates the energy, but the process of the molecules combining produces a free electron that is used to, or basically the free electron, enough of them creates the current through the circuit. And
that
the
makes
electricity is what
Next question.
the problem.
Being a bit old-fashioned, but when I think of an engine, I think of the noise that an engine makes. And from a single cylinder engine to a V12, you can tell if it's sweet or it's not sweet, and whether you switch it off. What sort of noise, apart from the propeller noise, do you envisage that these aircraft or these engines will make?
So I mean, you're welcome to come out at some point and listen to it run at the airport. It sounds like an electric motor. So there's that kind of whine there. There's no sort of piston noise or anything, obviously. But above about 1,000 RPM, like really all you can hear is the prop noise anyway. So it still sounds like a propeller.
Thank you.
Yes.
What are the respective weights for equivalent performance of a combustion engine compared to the system that you're currently working on?
Yep. So the system we're aiming for to put in the Bonanza will weigh like about 100 to 140 kilograms. So that'll have a pretty equivalent power to the IO 540, and I think that is 206 kilograms wet, thereabouts. So it's about 3/4 the weight of the engine that's coming out, conservatively.
Next.
Steve, you talked about the temperature of the fuel cell staying below 20 degrees Celsius. Is that right?
No.
No.
So the fuel cell will run at about 180 to 200 degrees Celsius.
Okay. Is it important that they stay at a set temperature?
So a little bit. The the efficiency of the reaction, like the chemical reaction that occurs, changes a little bit with the temperature.
So is that, so in other words, that relates to how much shower is coming through it, and that's, yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So if you run a little cooler, it runs a little less efficient. So you're creating more heat than you are electricity in that particular scenario. So you want to use that heat to bring everything up to temperature and find that optimal. So at altitude, for what reason? So as it gets colder at altitude, that's perfectly fine for us because we need to maintain 180 degrees in the fuel cell. So there's a lot of excess heat there, and the more heat that we can use to heat up the incoming air and everything means like it's yeah.
But the air will be colder at altitude, so
But that's fine. So we condition the air to 180 degrees to feed the fuel cell. So it doesn't affect us too much at all. Now the density changes and everything, that doesn't get affected too much either because we run a turbo compressor to compress that air to about two bar or so into the fuel cell as well. So that compression process helps bring the temperature of that air up again for the temperatures required to feed. So yeah, neither temperature or air density really affect the operating points of the aircraft.
Philip Orr's got a question.
Yeah, the whole concept has been proven, I guess, in automobiles. There's fuel cell driven automobiles like the Toyota Mirai.
Yep.
So the concept is proven, but adapting it to an airplane would be a little bit more complex because the advantage of an electric motor is that it's equally efficient over its whole rev range. So it doesn't matter whether it's revving slowly or at full, it's equally efficient.
Yeah.
Which isn't the case for a piston-driven engine, which is the reason that you have fixed pitch propellers, that you can run the engine at the optimum speed and change the pitch of the propeller. So that there's some some aerodynamic issues that you would need to solve, and whether or not you actually need fixed pitch propellers, or whether you can just change the rotation speed of the engine. So have you looked into that side of the application?
We have, and so it was a long time ago. I'm not going to pretend I remember everything about propellers there. There are other reasons for pitch, constant speed or variable pitch propellers than just motor speed as well. So we will still want to run a variable pitch prop on the Bonanza. So yeah, as you said, the system is proven out in other areas of technology. So the Mirai is a very successful car through parts of the US, through Europe, through Japan. It runs on fuel cell. It doesn't have a balanced battery or anything as well. So one of the challenges with fuel cells are the transients. So a hard acceleration and then followed by immediate braking and that constant power cycling of a fuel cell isn't actually that healthy for a fuel cell. So one of the benefits in the aviation environment is that we don't have the same transients as a motor car, for example. So it's in some ways more suited for that aviation type environment. So.
Another question coming. Yes, go ahead.
Just going back to the issue about temperature of the fuel cell, you're talking also about using liquid hydrogen. Are you using the liquid hydrogen to manage the fuel cell temperature at all?
No, we're using the temperature to
Just ambient
manage
temperature.
the liquid hydrogen gasification, I guess. So converting from liquid to gas to then feed the fuel cell. We need to bring it up about 370 degrees or something to the operating temperature. So yeah, a lot of the heat from the various cooling gets used to do that conditioning and rather than the other way around. So there is opportunities to use that temperature. There's a company in the UK that are using the liquid hydrogen to then cool or supercool basically their electric motors. So they're getting a lot of efficiency gains from just running the motors at such low temperatures. So there are other ways to do it, but they all come with a lot of complication, and there's only so many things you can bite off at once.
Hi, Steve.
Hey.
Dennis Baker. I'm a former ground and flight test engineer, so particularly interested in that part of the program.
Yep.
What aerodynamic work are you doing with the wing tanks?
Yep. So we have done very rudimentary like CFD analysis on those tanks so far. We want to try and perhaps fly at least the geometry that we currently have on an existing Bonanza, just as a risk mitigation exercise for CASA ahead of flying a new power plant as well as new aerodynamics ahead of that first flight. But at the same time, it's an experimental aircraft, so CASA's only concern is people on the ground rather than us. So like I said, we've got some CFD analysis that will prove that out, and as much ground testing as we can to at least simulate low speed performance. The tip tanks on a typical Bonanza have a lot of benefits there already, right? So you put tip tanks on an extra 80 gallons of fuel, and your MTOW actually goes up by about 400 pounds, I think, because of the dynamics of all the wind bending in the structure that is like the weight counteracting the wing bending and everything.
Wing bending relief.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. It's been great.
Okay.
And hope your program goes well.
Cool.
And I hope we'll soon hear more information about it. Whatever you have you been, or will you be reading a lot of articles in the various aviation magazines?
Yeah, so we've got a couple really good people on the team. Like we've got a head of partnerships. She does a great job at getting us out there in various news events and LinkedIn articles and magazines and everything else. So yeah, there's a little bit of media out there about us, but yeah, well, thank you all for your attention. And I will say, if there's anything else you want to know, if there's anything else you'd like to see or be involved in, or think there's ways you could contribute or anything, yeah, we'd love you to reach out. We take people around the office and the hangar all the time to